All right, traders, welcome to today's recap. This is Christian from Hertz Tribeca Trade Group, and today is August 30th. So we got one more day of the month to go. And just looking at a couple names that reported earnings after the close, look at Lulu. Wow, what a move. All the way up to 147, so that's up $10 from the close. Their numbers were fabulous that they came out with after the close. 71 cents versus 49 cents. Their guidance also way above expectations, so they are really executing, and it's pretty tremendous. We were talking about this name in the trading room. I think a lot of people who have visited or seen a Lulu store, they're packed, which is what a couple people in the trading room who are all over the country were talking about today. I did not play this one. I will always tell you whether or not what I do and what I don't do, and I'll talk about winners and losers, which I went long NTNX for earnings. It didn't work out. I'll talk about that one next, but man, what a move for this one. NTNX, we saw some call buying. I thought it was worth a shot. Notice that it's looks like it's finding some support at 56.84, but they did not have the same type of numbers that Autodesk and Splunk had last week. We saw some call buying about a week and a week and a half ago, two different occasions. They may have actually sold some of those calls. I was paying attention to that if they were just looking for a run into earnings, which they got. Right, this name has went from about $55 up to 62. So they probably took some of those profits, and it had a great pre-earnings run, and that's sometimes how people are playing. Names going into earnings. So I don't think they took the whole trade off, but I think they took a decent amount of profits. But they didn't have the same type of numbers when Splunk and Autodesk reported last week. They had guided up, and they beat on the top line and the bottom line. This was not that same quarter for NTNX. So I lost a little bit of money. I had a couple October call spreads on. Not that big of a deal, but I wanted to play it just because we've seen what some of these names can do when they do beat. All right, so that's that name. Overall, market kind of came in a little bit today. I think perfectly normal. Again, we're not going to go up completely in a straight line. I think the performance the last 2 weeks has been tremendous. I've had, I think, one of the best months I've had probably since January. I was very long going into this month, so the last couple weeks has just been, awesome in terms of taking off trades, and and even putting on some trades even this week that worked really well. Micron is a trade that I added this week, and I thought that this name could possibly get going. Notice the version point of controls here. If you're not familiar with what I call VPOCs, version point of controls, they are really good for taking targets and noticing where a big group of buyers and sellers have met up previously. The thinking here is that sometimes price will return to an area of high volume. There's a theory that price always remembers where buyers and sellers have met up previously before. So that's basically the thinking. And also, like if you think about, I know some people use gaps, and they talk about if that no gap remains unfilled. It's kind of like this. Sometimes when price does not revisit an area of high volume, at some point it will return, right? So the only time that you see the purple lines is when the price doesn't go through the point of control, right? Here it passed through, here it did not. Price was all the way down here, never went through this value area at all. And I'm on the 1 hour bar, so these value areas are for the whole week, right? So once that happens, and hence that's why they're called virgin, is because price has not revisited them, and once that is taken out, it's fulfilled. So again, it really gives me a great sense of where to take targets when I'm long something, and I took a target today in Micron. Right around here, and you could see the next thing that this has to do is maintain above the purple line, and then possibly could look for the next target around 56, which would be really nice for my long swing trade that I'm out in November. Same thing for Netflix. I'll give you a couple examples of some names. Netflix had a nice run today, but it moved right up to this VPOC. That's it. Notice how well this has behaved on a couple other occasions. Back here, when it fell fell right to this VPOC and then recovered. Down here, just tagged it just on this one bar. That's it. And that's how these things work. Sometimes price will just touch that area and then bounce from it. So right now, I would be looking at, I am long right now, but I would be looking at, possibly adding if it can get above 376 and maintain above there. Once it starts going and heading above 380, I would look for another target way up at 416, which would be a nice, which would be a nice trade. I also added a little bit of again, small stuff. When I add trades, considering what the market has done recently, I'm not adding a lot of risk. I'm adding small trades at this point. But I think Facebook is also trying to put in a little bit of a bottom pattern. If we go back to the daily chart, you'll see what I mean here. You've got the bottom of value, which is a couple times now act as good support. By the way, you don't have to worry about these two purple lines until the price gets outside of the value area. Then it becomes more, I would call it, activated. But I would be looking for this to get above 180 and possibly get up to 190. But first things first, it's got to get above 181. And this is a developing value area for the month of September, which we got one more day, so this won't change too much. And again, this has not been touched, this point of control. So that's why you've got a new purple line being drawn. All right, a couple other things. Like I said, I like to talk about the winners and the losers. SIG was a nice winner today. We had an earnings trade on SIG. I had sold premium, and then I actually played, because this has a big short interest, I actually went long on the open. I covered my my earnings trade for a nice profit, because I was short a put spread, so I need to cover that, which I did for like 30 cents today. I think I sold it for $1.80. And then I actually played this to the long side, which worked very well. I want to talk about EA for a second. So why am I going to dwell on this, right? Because we have to talk about not only the winners, but the losers. And also, I think it really brings up a good example of option activity, that it doesn't always work. And you should know this. If you're following option activity, or if you're looking for signals in option activity, the best thing I could tell you is to realize that most of these trades, well, I don't want to say most, but there's a lot that don't work. What is option activity, first of all, good for? Right? It's good for momentum. If you're a day trader, and you could see somebody go ahead and buy calls aggressively like they did in Facebook this morning, you could ride that wave all day long as a day trade, and you could take it off and be done with it, right? So that's one thing. So if you're a very fast day trader, you could use it for momentum, not so much for, and you don't have to even think about a swing trade in it. You could also just think of it as a trade idea, right? And that's a lot of times what I do. That's how I use option activity. It could be a name that it just wasn't on my radar at all. Like we saw some VMware, just a little bit of calls that went up today. VMware had a little bit of a troubled quarter. But look at the chart. It doesn't look bad. Didn't close on the highs, I think, because of how the end of the day finished. But, it looks compelling here, possibly for a swing trade. But again, I'm not going to put all my marbles just because somebody bought a little bit of next week's calls for a momentum play. That doesn't really add up. So again, that's how I use it. I think it really gives some good ideas, but I would never hold on to something because I think that there's a lot of money in the name and somebody's positioned in it. And why do I think like that? Because if you look at the performance of hedge funds, which are mostly the ones who are buying these options, what's hedge fund performance year to date? I think equity hedge fund performance on average is down this year compared to the S&P being up huge, Qs being up huge, IWM being up huge, and hedge funds are down. So you kind of have to think about it. Doesn't make logical sense to say, hey, I'm going to put I'm going to stick with this trade just because there's positioning in the name, right? So again, there's some positives, but I think just the amount of times that people are on Twitter and just pointing out any order flow, to me it seems like people are really getting caught up on it, getting way too caught up in it, and it's not a holy grail. It's not, and I think it also worries me a lot because there's so many people who are out there following this activity that it's kind of gotten a herd mentality, and I think the edge is kind of losing itself. So in that respect, right? But I still think that you could play it for momentum, for day trades, and you could use it for ideas. But I would not get married to a position. And this is a great example because everybody's been tweeting about EA and about the positioning that they were doing out in January. But again, it is no assurance. There is no correlation between somebody purchasing calls and the stock going up. And if there's a study, I sent this out last weekend, and I got a bunch of people who were angry at me for saying this. But I said, show me the results of, because somebody told me, oh well, if you follow all of them, you're going to do well. And I said, okay, show me, show me the results of anyone. And I'm not just talking about 1 week's, because people will be like, oh, let me show you like when I have a 2-week run, short-term profits. No, if you're following this activity for time, long periods, go ahead, show me some empirical evidence that it works that way for swing trades. So anyway, it's good to talk about this stuff. I know I'm being a little bit negative, but these are things that you want to think about when you're trading, and not get hooked into just because there's option activity. Was I long EA? Absolutely. I had this position on in January. I was watching the 200-day moving average. It did not provide a sell signal for me, so I stayed in it. It certainly wasn't doing anything the last couple weeks, and actually was giving a little bit of relative underperformance. So anyway, that's the situation with this one. And again, the other thing that I think about when I see these trades is I try to be consistent with the position size. So for me, and everybody's different, right? Everybody has different styles. My style is I generally have more winners than losers, right? I have a pretty good batting average in terms of winners. So what gets me into trouble is when I position much larger than normal in a particular name and that name doesn't work out. That's happened to me in the past. So what I do is I pretty much take the same type of position size, the same type of risk per trade, because I know that over time I should be doing, if I stick with the system and having more winners than losers and cutting down losers before they become big losers, then all in all, I'll have a great year, a great month, and then a great year. So that being said, some other names that kind of caught my eye in terms of positioning. Like I said, Facebook was very good. The VMware, we saw a little bit of calls there. VKTX, Pandora, saw some calls. A couple other charts, little Taiwan Semiconductor. Anytime I have an asterisk next to a name here, I usually go back and I check open interest to see if that, in fact, increased. Couple Broadcom saw some positioning September, so next week's calls going up in front or ahead of their September 6th earnings report. So a couple other charts that I think are interesting. QDEL. At one point, I need to double check, but there was 1,000 of these October calls being purchased. This is another hot area of the market. This is life sciences. This is healthcare equipment. This name is in the XHE ETF, which held up very well today. But look at this breakout out of a little bit of consolidation here. So calls were being purchased, throughout the session, but mainly after it was already up decently, but up 4%. I would watch for some continuation. Unfortunately, the options are very, very wide in this name. So either I would stick with the options where they've been purchasing or just buy the stock because it's really, really wide in the options. I've traded this name once before. Also, a couple names that a member brought to my attention. Check out Triple D. So yes, this has had a big move. It's had some real nice continuation after earnings, but take a step back and look at where this thing has come from. If it pops out above here, speaking of VPOCs, you got a whole bunch up here. Also SSYS. This looks pretty interesting to me too. Look at this base that this thing has been forming for a long time. So I actually like this chart a little bit better because I don't think it's quite as extended. It's getting up here in RSI about 70. But if you zoom in, you got a VPOC up here at 27, about 27 and a half. So that could be something to shoot for. All right, so that's a 15-minute video. My strategy, which I'm always happy to share a little bit. I mentioned I did a little bit of some trades, a small trade in Facebook, small trade in Netflix today, just adding a little bit of risk there till October. But really, my game plan is to kind of close out the month and close down some more exposure on these days where I think the market is kind of run its course a little bit in the short term. I'm always taking off more risk than I'm adding. So I'm always trying to cut down my risk and increase my cash balance. And then, you could live to fight for another day. Salesforce was another name that I was looking at today. It didn't go low enough for me. I would like to see it, and again, I'm really being picky here, but I would like to see it maybe come back into the 20-day moving average. Anytime this name has been coming in, it's been a great buying opportunity, but I think it could come in a little bit further. So I did not do anything today in Salesforce, but I'll wait a little bit. It's another name on my radar. Guys, have a great night and see you tomorrow.